What happens when a Hollywood legend walks into what he thinks is a friendly interview, only to find himself in the hot seat, facing questions he never agreed to answer? Tonight, we witnessed one of the most explosive television moments in recent memory, as Kevin Spacey sat down with Entertainment Tonight, expecting a routine promotional appearance, but instead found himself defending his entire career against an unexpected ambush. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're going to want to discuss this unbelievable exchange with other viewers. Trust me, you've never seen anything quite like this. The interview started innocently enough. Kevin Spacey walked onto the Entertainment Tonight set with his usual confident demeanor, settling into the guest chair across from host Rebecca Martinez. The studio lights were bright. The cameras were rolling. And what was supposed to be a standard 10-minute segment promoting his upcoming independent film quickly transformed into something nobody saw coming. "Kevin, thank you so much for joining us tonight," Rebecca began with her trademark warm smile. "I know you're here to talk about your new project, but I have to ask, how does it feel to be working again after everything you've been through?" Spacey's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, but the cameras caught it, that slight tightening around his eyes, the way his hands gripped the armrests just a fraction tighter. "Well, Rebecca, I'm grateful to be here. The film is something I'm incredibly passionate about, and I think audiences are going to connect with the story we're telling." But Rebecca wasn't letting him off that easy. "That's wonderful, but I think our viewers are curious about your personal journey. You've been relatively quiet for the past few years. Some might say you've been hiding." The word hiding hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Spacey's media-trained composure flickered for just a moment. "Hiding? I wouldn't characterize it that way at all. I've been working, creating, focusing on my craft. Sometimes the best thing an artist can do is step back and let the work speak for itself." "But Kevin, let's be honest here. Your career took a significant hit. Projects were canceled. Roles were recast. Don't you think you owe your fans some sort of explanation? This was not going according to the script that Spacey's publicist had approved. The questions were supposed to focus on the new film. Maybe touch on his theater background. Certainly not dive into the controversies that had derailed his career." Spacey leaned forward slightly, his voice taking on a sharper edge. "I think what I owe my fans is good work. That's what I've always given them, and that's what I'll continue to give them. The noise, the speculation, the court of public opinion, none of that changes the fact that I'm an actor who's dedicated his life to this craft." Rebecca sensed she had struck a nerve, and like any good journalist, she pressed harder. "But surely you understand why people have questions. When allegations surface, when patterns emerge, don't you think transparency is important?" "Patterns?" Spacey's voice rose just slightly, enough for the sound engineers to notice the change in audio levels. "What patterns are you referring to, Rebecca? Because I think you're conflating rumors with facts, speculation with evidence." The studio suddenly felt smaller, the air thicker. Rebecca had clearly done her homework, and she wasn't backing down. "I'm talking about multiple individuals coming forward with similar stories. I'm talking about a pattern of behavior that many in the industry have whispered about for years." Spacey's legendary composure was beginning to crack. His left eye developed a slight twitch, something his acting coaches had worked with him to control decades ago. "You know what, Rebecca? I came here in good faith to talk about my work, about a film that I believe in. Instead, you're ambushing me with gossip and innuendo. Is this really what Entertainment Tonight has become? A tabloid show masquerading as legitimate entertainment journalism?" The accusation hit Rebecca like a slap across the face. Her professional smile faltered for just a moment before she regained her composure. "I'm simply asking questions that I believe our audience wants answered. These aren't tabloid rumors, Kevin. These are serious allegations that have been reported by reputable news organizations." "Reported? Yes. Proven? That's an entirely different matter." Spacey's voice was getting louder now, his hands gesturing more emphatically. "Do you understand the difference between an allegation and a conviction? Between an accusation and evidence? Because it seems like you're treating them as the same thing." The camera operators exchanged glances. This was not the softball celebrity interview they had expected to shoot. The director in the control room was making frantic hand signals, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let this explosive moment play out. Rebecca made the decision for him by leaning in closer, her journalist instincts taking over completely. "Kevin, I understand the legal distinctions you're making, but don't you think there's also a moral responsibility here? When multiple people tell similar stories, when there's a pattern of behavior that spans decades, doesn't that warrant some sort of acknowledgement? Spacey stood up abruptly, his chair rolling backward from the force. The sudden movement caused one of the camera operators to instinctively zoom out to capture the full scene. You want acknowledgement? Here's what I'll acknowledge. I've spent 40 years building a career creating characters that have moved audiences around the world. I've won Academy Awards. I've performed Shakespeare on the greatest stages in the world. And you want to reduce all of that to gossip and speculation. Rebecca remained seated, but her posture straightened, her voice becoming firmer. No one is diminishing your achievements as an actor, Kevin. But talent doesn't excuse behavior. Success doesn't erase harm that may have been caused to others. May have been caused. May have. Do you hear yourself, Rebecca? You're building an entire narrative on may and possibilities and rumors. Spacey was pacing now, his movement causing the lighting director to frantically adjust the spots to keep him properly lit. The studio crew had never seen anything like this. Spacey was now standing behind his chair, using it almost like a barrier between himself and Rebecca, who remained seated, but leaning forward like a prosecutor delivering a closing argument. The tension was so thick you could practically see it in the air between them. Kevin, please sit down. We can have a civil conversation about this, Rebecca said, her voice taking on a more measured tone. Though her eyes never left his face, she knew she was getting somewhere. And she wasn't about to let up now. Civil, you call this ambush civil? Spacey gripped the back of his chair, so tightly his knuckles were turning white. You invited me here under false pretenses. Your producers told my team this would be about the film. Instead, you're trying to relitigate my entire life on national television. Rebecca tilted her head slightly, a gesture that came across as almost condescending. Kevin, these questions aren't coming out of nowhere. When you choose to return to the public eye, when you choose to promote a project, surely you understood that people would have questions about your absence from Hollywood. My absence? Spacey let out a bitter laugh that echoed through the studio. You mean my exile? Let's call it what it is, Rebecca. Hollywood didn't just ask questions. They made a decision without a trial, without due process, without giving me a chance to defend myself. But Kevin, there were legal proceedings. There were investigations. And what were the outcomes of those investigations? Spacey's voice was rising again, his famous baritone taking on a sharp, almost metallic edge. Tell your viewers about the outcomes, Rebecca. Tell them about the cases that were dismissed. Tell them about the charges that were dropped. Rebecca shifted in her seat, clearly not expecting Spacey to go on the offensive. Some cases were dismissed, yes, but that doesn't mean the allegations weren't credible. That doesn't mean harm wasn't done. Credible according to whom? You. The court of public opinion. Spacey moved around to the side of his chair, now no longer hiding behind it. Do you know what it's like to have your life destroyed by accusations? Do you know what it's like to watch everything you've worked for disappear because of stories, because of narratives that fit a particular moment in time? The cameras were capturing every micro-expression, every gesture, every inflection in his voice. This was television gold, and everyone in the studio knew it. Rebecca pressed on, sensing that Spacey was becoming more vulnerable, more emotional. Kevin, I can't imagine how difficult this has been for you. But surely you can understand why people found these allegations concerning. We're talking about young actors, people in vulnerable positions. Vulnerable positions. Spacey's voice cracked slightly on the word vulnerable. And what about my vulnerable position? What about being tried and convicted in the media before anyone bothered to examine the facts? What about the presumption of innocence that's supposed to be the foundation of our justice system? Rebecca leaned back slightly, but her gaze remained steady. The court of public opinion isn't the same as a court of law, Kevin. People make judgments based on patterns, based on multiple accounts that corroborate each other. Multiple accounts? Spacey was pacing again, his movement more agitated now. You want to talk about multiple accounts? Let me tell you about the multiple accounts of people who've worked with me, who've known me for decades, who never saw any of this alleged behavior. Where are those stories, Rebecca? Where are those voices in your narrative? Those voices have been largely silent, Kevin, and many people have questioned why that is. Maybe because they're intimidated. Maybe because they know what happens to people who don't follow the approved narrative in this town. Spacey stopped pacing and faced Rebecca directly. Maybe because they've seen what happened to me, and they don't want to become targets themselves. Rebecca's expression remained neutral, but there was something in her eyes, a spark of genuine curiosity rather than just journalistic aggression. Are you saying there's been a conspiracy against you? I'm saying there's been a rush to judgment. I'm saying that in an industry that prides itself on storytelling, people got very comfortable with a particular story about me, and they didn't want to hear any alternatives. Spacey's voice was getting hoarse from the strain of the confrontation. I'm saying that nuance died, Rebecca. Complexity died. Everything became black and white, guilty or innocent, monster or saint. But Kevin, when multiple people come forward with similar stories about similar behavior, patterns of manipulation, of using power to. Spacey held up his hand, his voice suddenly dropping to almost a whisper. Just stop right there. You want to talk about manipulation? Let's talk about the manipulation of public opinion. Let's talk about how a few accusations became an avalanche of assumed guilt. The studio was completely silent now, except for the low hum of the cameras and the barely audible sound of the air conditioning. Even the crew seemed to be holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Rebecca took a deep breath before speaking. Kevin, I'm not here to condemn you. I'm here to ask the questions that our viewers want answered. And I think what they want to know is whether you feel any responsibility for the pain that others have experienced. Responsibility for pain? Spacey's voice was barely controlled now. Rebecca, do you want to know about pain? Do you want to know what it feels like to watch your life's work become synonymous with shame? Do you want to know what it's like to have your name become a punchline, a cautionary tale, a symbol of everything wrong with an industry? I can only imagine how difficult. No, you can't imagine. You can't imagine what it's like to be erased. Not just canceled, not just unemployed, but erased. Like 40 years of work, of dedication, of craft never happened. Spacey's hands were shaking now, and he seemed to realize it because he clenched them into fists. You want to talk about victims? I'm a victim too, Rebecca. I'm a victim of a culture that decided guilt by association was justice. Rebecca's voice became gentler, but she didn't back down. Kevin, I hear your pain. I really do. But don't you think it's possible for multiple people to be hurt in a situation like this? Don't you think it's possible that your pain and the pain of your accusers can coexist? My accusers. Spacey repeated the words slowly, as if tasting something bitter. My accusers who've remained largely anonymous while my face, my name, my reputation have been dragged through every media outlet in the world. My accusers who've been protected while I've been exposed to every form of public humiliation imaginable. Humiliation seemed to be the breaking point. Spacey's composure, which had been hanging by a thread throughout the interview, finally began to completely unravel. Voice took on a different quality, sharper, more desperate, as if he was fighting for his professional life in real time. You know what the real tragedy is here, Rebecca? Spacey moved closer to her chair, his presence suddenly more imposing. The real tragedy is that we've created a culture where accusations are treated as convictions, where allegations are treated as facts, where the mere suggestion of impropriety becomes career suicide. Rebecca didn't flinch, but her grip tightened on her notes. Kevin, surely you understand why people take these allegations seriously. We're talking about abuse of power, about people who were in vulnerable positions. Abuse of power. Spacey's laugh was harsh, almost manic. Let me tell you about abuse of power, Rebecca. The abuse of power is what happened to me. The abuse of power is an entire industry deciding that I was guilty without a trial, without evidence, without even the courtesy of a proper investigation. There were investigations, Kevin. Multiple investigations. Investigations that cleared me. Spacey's voice exploded through the studio, causing several crew members to jump. Investigations that found no evidence, no proof. Nothing but stories and accusations and hearsay. But that didn't matter, did it? Because the narrative was already written. Rebecca's professional mask was starting to slip. This was far more intense than anything she had prepared for. Kevin, please, let's try to keep this constructive. Constructive. Spacey was pacing again, but his movements were more erratic now, less controlled. You want constructive? Here's what's constructive. The truth. And the truth is that I've been made a scapegoat for an entire industry's guilt about how it operates. That's a serious accusation. Is it? Or is it just an observation from someone who's lived in Hollywood for 4 decades? Spacey stopped directly in front of Rebecca's chair. You think I'm the only one who's ever used my position to meet people? You think I'm the only one who's ever blurred the lines between professional and personal? The difference is that when the music stopped, when everyone needed someone to blame, I was the one left without a chair. Rebecca shifted uncomfortably. Kevin, are you admitting to inappropriate behavior? I'm admitting to being human, Rebecca. I'm admitting to making mistakes. To having relationships that maybe weren't perfect, to navigating an industry where the lines have always been blurry. Spacey's voice was getting more agitated with each word. But being human isn't the same as being a predator. Making mistakes isn't the same as committing crimes. But when those mistakes hurt people, when they involve people who were younger, who were in less powerful positions. Stop right there. Spacey held up his hand again, but this time his whole arm was trembling. You're doing it again. You're taking something complex, something nuanced, and you're reducing it to a simple narrative of power and victimization. Rebecca leaned forward, her journalistic instincts overriding her concern for Spacey's obvious distress. Kevin, isn't that exactly what these situations are about? Power dynamics, age differences, professional hierarchies. And what about the power dynamic here, Rebecca? Spacey's voice was becoming more shrill, more desperate. What about you sitting there with your cameras and your national platform, ambushing me with questions I wasn't prepared for? What about the power you have to shape public opinion about me? Who's the victim in this scenario? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Rebecca paused, clearly not expecting the tables to be turned on her so directly. Kevin, I'm doing my job. I'm asking questions that the public wants answered. The public wants blood, Rebecca. The public wants spectacle. They want to see someone fall from grace. And I've been cast as the perfect villain for their entertainment. Spacey was speaking faster now, his words tumbling over each other. But here's what they don't want to hear. Here's what you don't want to report. I'm not a villain. I'm not a monster. I'm a flawed human being who got caught in the crossfire of a cultural moment. Kevin, I think we need to take a break. No. Spacey's response was immediate and forceful. No breaks, no commercial interruptions, no editing room magic to clean this up. You wanted the real Kevin Spacey? You wanted answers? Then let me give them to you. Rebecca looked toward the control room, clearly seeking guidance. But Spacey stepped into her line of sight, blocking her view of the director's booth. Look at me, Rebecca. Don't look at your producers. Don't look at your cameras. Look at me. Spacey's voice was commanding despite its obvious strain. You want to know if I feel responsible for pain? Of course I do. Anyone with a conscience feels responsible when other people are hurt. But responsibility and guilt aren't the same thing. What's the difference? The difference is that I can feel sorry that people were hurt without accepting that I'm the monster you want me to be. Spacey's eyes were bright with unshed tears, but his voice remained strong. I can acknowledge that power dynamics exist without accepting that every interaction I've ever had was predatory. Rebecca's voice became softer, but her questions remained pointed. Kevin, what about Anthony Rapp? What about his specific allegations? At the mention of that name, something shifted in Spacey's demeanor. His pacing stopped abruptly, and for a moment he looked genuinely shocked that she had brought up specific details. Anthony Rapp. Spacey repeated the name slowly, as if he was tasting something he hadn't expected. You really want to go there? You really want to dissect specific allegations on national television? Kevin, his story has been public for years. He was very specific about what happened, about when it happened, about how it affected him. Anthony Rapp was a troubled young man who... Stop. Now it was Rebecca's turn to hold up her hand. Kevin, I'm going to stop you right there. Whatever you're about to say about Anthony Rapp, whatever you're about to reveal about his personal life or his struggles, that's not fair. That's not appropriate. Fair. Spacey's voice cracked on the word. You want to talk about fair? Is it fair that one person's recollection of events from decades ago can destroy everything I've worked for? Is it fair that I have to sit here and defend myself against accusations that I can barely remember the context for? Kevin, trauma affects memory differently. Just because someone takes time to come forward doesn't mean their story isn't valid. And just because someone comes forward doesn't mean their story is accurate. Spacey was shouting now, his voice echoing through the studio. Memory is fallible. Rebecca, perception is subjective. People remember things the way they need to remember them, the way that fits their narrative about their own lives. The studio was at a breaking point. Spacey's last words about memory and perception seemed to echo through the space. And for a moment, there was complete silence. Rebecca looked at her notes, then back at Spacey, who was standing rigid behind his chair, his chest rising and falling rapidly, as if he had just run a marathon. Kevin, Rebecca said quietly, are you saying that Anthony Rapp's memory of what happened is wrong? That question, delivered so simply, so directly, was the final straw. Something in Spacey's face changed completely. The desperation was replaced by rage. The pleading was replaced by fury. His entire body seemed to coil like a spring about to snap. You know what, Rebecca? You know what? Spacey's voice was dangerously low now, barely controlled. I'm done. I'm done with this charade. I'm done pretending that this is journalism. I'm done pretending that you care about the truth. Kevin, I do care about the truth. The truth? Spacey exploded, his voice filling every corner of the studio. The truth is that you people destroyed me for ratings. The truth is that you took a complicated situation and turned it into entertainment. The truth is that you don't care about justice. You don't care about facts. You only care about the story that sells. Rebecca tried to maintain her composure, but Spacey's sudden eruption had clearly shaken her. Kevin, please. Please what? Please be quiet? Please be a good little disgraced celebrity and take my punishment? Spacey was moving toward her chair now, his voice getting louder with each step. Please pretend that what you've done to me is acceptable. Please pretend that ruining someone's life based on accusations is justice. The camera operators were frantically trying to keep both subjects in frame as Spacey moved around the set. The director in the control room was making frantic hand signals, but nobody seemed to know whether to cut the feed or keep rolling. Kevin, you need to calm down. Calm down. Calm down. Spacey's voice reached a crescendo that seemed to shake the very walls of the studio. You ambush me on national television. You dredge up every accusation that's ever been made against me. You try to make me confess to crimes I didn't commit, and you want me to calm down? Rebecca stood up from her chair, perhaps feeling threatened by his proximity, perhaps simply responding to the intensity of the moment. Kevin, I think we should end this interview. Oh no, Rebecca. Oh no, no, no. Spacey's laugh was wild, almost unhinged. You started this. You wanted the real Kevin Spacey. You wanted to dig into my life, my pain, my destruction. Then you're going to sit there and hear what I have to say. Kevin, you're scaring me. Good. Maybe you should be scared. Maybe you should understand what it feels like to be cornered, to be attacked, to have nowhere to run. Spacey was pacing again, but his movements were erratic, unpredictable. Do you know what it's like to wake up every morning knowing that half the world thinks you're a monster? Do you know what it's like to have your own industry, your own colleagues, your own friends turn their backs on you? Rebecca looked toward the control room again, clearly seeking help. But Spacey stepped into her line of sight once more. Look at me when I'm talking to you. You wanted this conversation, so have the courage to see it through. His voice was raw from shouting, but he didn't seem to notice or care. You want to know about responsibility? Here's what I'm responsible for. I'm responsible for being naive enough to think that talent mattered more than politics. I'm responsible for believing that due process meant something. I'm responsible for trusting people who threw me away the moment it became convenient. Kevin, you're having some kind of breakdown. We need to stop this. Breakdown? This isn't a breakdown, Rebecca. This is clarity. This is what happens when someone finally tells the truth in this town. Spacey's eyes were wild now, but his voice was becoming more focused, more dangerous. You want to know what really happened? You want to know the real story? The real story is that Hollywood needed a sacrifice, and I was convenient. Rebecca was backing away from him now, moving toward the edge of the set. Kevin, I think you should sit down. I think you should take a breath. I've been taking breaths for years, Rebecca. I've been sitting quietly, being a good boy, hoping that if I just waited long enough, if I just stayed out of the way long enough, maybe people would remember that I'm a human being. Spacey's voice cracked, and for a moment, the rage gave way to something that looked almost like heartbreak. But that's not how this works, is it? That's not how any of this works. Kevin. No, let me finish. Let me say what I came here to say. Spacey stopped pacing and faced the main camera directly, as if he was addressing the audience at home rather than Rebecca. I am Kevin Spacey. I have spent my entire adult life dedicated to the craft of acting. I have created characters that have moved people, that have made people think, that have made people feel. That is my legacy. That is who I am. His voice was getting stronger now, more controlled. But there was still an undercurrent of barely contained fury. I am not perfect. I have made mistakes. I have hurt people's feelings. I have been difficult to work with. I have probably said things and done things that I wish I could take back. But I am not the monster that you and your industry have made me out to be. Rebecca had reached the edge of the set now, but she turned back to face him. Kevin, what about the people who say you hurt them? What about their pain? Their pain. Spacey's voice rose again, the control he had briefly found slipping away. What about my pain? What about the pain of watching everything you've worked for disappear overnight? What about the pain of being judged and convicted without a trial? What about the pain of being erased from an industry that I helped build? Kevin, that's not the same thing. Isn't it? Isn't it exactly the same thing? Pain is pain, Rebecca. Suffering is suffering. And I've been suffering for years while everyone celebrates my destruction as if it's some kind of victory for justice. Spacey was moving back toward her now, his movements quick and agitated. But here's what nobody wants to admit. Here's the dirty little secret that you and everyone else in this business knows, but won't say out loud. Every single person in positions of power in this industry has stories. Every single person has used their influence, their connections, their status to meet people, to charm people, to seduce people. Kevin, the difference is that when the witch hunt started, when everyone needed someone to burn at the stake, I was the one who got caught. I was the one who became the symbol. I was the one who had to pay for everyone else's sins. His voice was reaching that dangerous crescendo again. And you know what the most infuriating part is? The most infuriating part is that people like you get to sit in judgment of people like me. As if you're somehow morally superior, as if you've never made a mistake, never crossed a line, never done anything you're ashamed of. Rebecca's voice was barely a whisper now. Kevin, I think you need help. Help. Spacey laughed, and the sound was genuinely frightening. I needed help years ago, Rebecca. I needed help when the accusations first started. I needed help when my projects were being canceled. I needed help when my friends stopped returning my phone calls. But nobody offered help then. Everyone was too busy distancing themselves, too busy protecting their own careers, too busy virtue signaling about how disgusted they were with my alleged behavior. It's not too late to get help now. Yes, it is. Spacey's voice suddenly dropped to almost a whisper. And somehow that was more chilling than all the shouting had been. It's too late for a lot of things, Rebecca. It's too late for my career. It's too late for my reputation. It's too late for the relationships that were destroyed. It's too late for the life I had before all of this happened. The studio was completely silent except for the low hum of the cameras and the sound of Spacey's labored breathing. Rebecca stood frozen at the edge of the set, clearly unsure whether to approach him or run. But you know it's not too late? Spacey looked directly into the main camera again. It's not too late for the truth. And the truth is that I refuse to be your scapegoat anymore. I refuse to be the symbol of everything wrong with this industry. I refuse to apologize for crimes I didn't commit just to make everyone else feel better about themselves. With that declaration, Spacey turned and walked off the set, leaving Rebecca standing alone under the studio lights, her mouth slightly open, her notes scattered on the floor where she had dropped them during the confrontation. The cameras kept rolling for another 30 seconds, capturing Rebecca's shocked expression and the empty chair where Kevin Spacey had been sitting just minutes before. When the director finally called cut, the silence in the studio was deafening. What you've just witnessed was one of the most explosive interviews in television history. A raw, unfiltered look at a man who felt he had nothing left to lose. Whether you believe Kevin Spacey's version of events or not, there's no denying the power and intensity of what just unfolded. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and drop a comment below. What did you think of Kevin Spacey's explosive response? Do you think he was justified in his anger?